Welcome to Terrifying Tales, the channel dedicated to telling original horror stories. The Blue Bow Killer by C.J. Knight. It started one winter 20 years ago without warning. Winters in Lone Valley are always miserable. The town sits in a valley where the sun rarely visits. During the winter months, the fog arrives before dawn and settles until midday. But one winter 20 years ago, the fog seemed endless. Unlike normal winters, this fog was more reminiscent of something seen in London long ago. Not happy to merely shroud the streets, this fog was suffocating, all-enveloping. That winter, you could get yourself lost on the trip from the front door to your car. And unlike previous winters, the fog never left. It was ever present. The daily midday reprieve from the fog that winter never came. The first murder caught the town off guard. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was a senior in high school. Her name was Judy Morrison. Judy was a quiet girl who kept to herself. School ended for the day, and although most of us could drive, thanks to the fog, most people walked to and from school. I was always a quiet sort of guy. The winter school dance was in a fortnight's time. I didn't have a date. And I was pretty sure Judy didn't either. That afternoon after the last bell, I psyched myself up to ask her to go. I searched the crowded corridors for her red hair. Judy was plain looking, but that hair was something special. Through the sea of students, I spotted her hair leaving the school doors. I hurried to catch up and push through. Outside there was nothing but fog. I'd miss my chance. Defeated, I resolved to ask her before class the next morning. I wouldn't get the chance. That momentary glimpse of her hair was the last time I saw her alive. Judy's walk home was further than most. She lived with her father in one of the cheaper rentals on the outskirts of town. Her head would have been down as she walked through the fog, her eyes on the footpath, making sure she never strayed onto the road, where passing cars would have no chance to see her. Judy was unwise to the eyes watching her, knowing which way she'd walk home, waiting to strike. The fog was the perfect cover. Judy had no chance of seeing the killer move in on her. It took 2 days to find her. In a cruel turn, Judy had almost made it all the way home. They found her body in the front yard of a neighbouring house. The fog had been that thick, passers-by hadn't seen her lying there. It was only when the neighbour stubbornly decided to mow his lawns, despite the terrible fog, that he stumbled upon Judy. Police were at a loss. Judy had no enemies, no dark hidden secrets, and little to no friends. It appeared to be a wrong place, wrong time, random attack. I found out later that Judy had been strangled, and a neat blue ribbon had been tied around her neck. Judy's body hadn't been brutalised, nor had the killer put her on display. With no evidence to go on, the investigation went nowhere. As the days rolled on, so did life in Lone Valley. Judy's death wasn't forgotten, but it was dismissed as a tragic once-off. Students at the high school whispered of rumours of a secret boyfriend, or speculated that her father was responsible, or the neighbour who found her body. I never thought that the rumours were malicious. I think it was people needing a reason, something to put their mind at ease. Something to point to show why it happened to Judy, and more importantly, why it wouldn't happen to them. Fear subsided in Lone Valley as interest in Judy's murder waned. The town had no way of knowing it was only the beginning. About a fortnight after Judy's body was found, Maggie Swift went to the movies with a group of friends. Maggie lived in the main part of town, in one of the luxury apartments located above the shop fronts. The walk home from the movies wasn't far. The movie finished around 8 p.m. Maggie walked the familiar streets home. It was a Friday night, and despite the heavy fog and cold, the main part of town was reasonably busy. Maggie would have felt safe in the crowd. Pebble Lane had a dark history. It was an old cobblestone alleyway. Once upon a time it was sat directly behind the town's old pubs and hotels. It was the preferred business area for the ladies of the night during that period, making it a hive for crime and the odd murder. With the passage of time, Pebble Lane never changed, but the buildings and people around it did. No longer was it a hive of criminal enterprise. It now backed onto various restaurants and other businesses. On this particular night, it would have appeared like the setting of a horror film. A pebblestone path set between the unlit backs of the old brick buildings, no light, and filled with thick fog. Despite all of this, Maggie walked in there that night anyway. She would have walked that alley many times before. The alley cut 20 minutes off the time taken to get home to her apartment. Someone was waiting for Maggie, concealed in the fog of Pebble Lane. Her last moments would have been terrifying. So close to home, so many people on the street nearby, yet no one close enough to hear her screams for help, or if they did, unable to find her in the fog. Maggie was found soon after her murder. A busboy taking trash into the alley from a restaurant found her body lying beside the bins, a neat piece of blue ribbon tied in a neat bow around her neck, just like Judy. Despite the fast discovery, police found themselves once more at a loss for answers. Town had been busy, yet no one remembered seeing Maggie on her way home. Maggie's friends hadn't seen anyone suspicious around the cinema when they left, and none of them thought Maggie had a boyfriend and couldn't think of any enemies. The similarities between Judy and Maggie's murders were undeniable. Police tried to keep a lid on the investigation, but the details leaked to the press. Headlines followed, and the Blue Bow Killer was born. As the weeks rolled by, more girls were murdered. Rebecca Douglas was strangled by her car in the car park of the local burger restaurant when her shift ended for the night. Tracy Janice was found a few days later strangled in the local park. Her beagle remained by her side until she was found. 4 victims, and the only witness, could not speak. A town seeking answers, with none provided by the police, tend to create their own. 20 years ago, times were different. The townspeople, desperate to feel safe, found their solace in victim blaming. Judy was a girl from the wrong side of town, who it was decided hung around with the wrong crowd. Maggie was the stupid girl who invited her attack by walking alone in a darkened alley at night. Rebecca, admirable for working, should have known to ask someone to walk her out to her car. And poor Tracy, she was just so silly to go to the park alone. She was asking to be murdered. The next victim changed everything. Elizabeth Jones was a popular God-fearing girl, the apple of the town's eye, an avid churchgoer and volunteer. Toward the end of winter, Elizabeth was volunteering at the homeless shelter. It was the dinner shift, and her warm smile and friendly demeanour made her a favourite among those looking for a hot meal on a cold evening. On this particular night, Elizabeth finished up at the regular time, 8 p.m. Those in attendance urged her to be careful, knowing that she walked home. Elizabeth assured them she'd be fine. The smart and friendly girl had arranged for a chaperone to walk her home safely. As she left the shelter, some saw her walk away into the fog in the company of a boy. Everyone happy that she had protection never thought to ask who he was, and the fog made it impossible to tell who he was as they walked into the evening. Her parents found Elizabeth later that night, her body lying respectfully on her bed, with her arms resting on her chest. Her dress was neatly in place and her hair tidy, the blue ribbon bow tied neatly around her neck. The town was in a panic. Elizabeth's murder was different. She had done all the right things, arranged to walk home with company, stuck to the main roads. She even made it home. But the town knew now. Elizabeth knew her killer, invited them into her home. The killer wasn't some stranger, nor was it a person targeting those lacking caution or moral character. Someone living among them was responsible, someone that a good girl like Elizabeth had trusted. As spring arrived, the fog departed, and with it, the murders stopped as abruptly as they had started. The police continued to investigate, but the murders remained unsolved. With the passage of time and a need to feel safe, the townspeople surmised the killer was perhaps one of the homeless, that either moved on from Lone Valley or died, ending the reign of terror. 20 years on, people felt safe in Lone Valley. The murders were never forgotten, but now considered a tragic memory more than a looming threat. When I finished high school later that year, I moved away for college. As scary as that winter was 20 years ago, I never really understood what parents went through. The constant fear of the safety of your own child is something you learn to appreciate when you enter parenthood yourself. I'm married now with 2 kids of my own. We moved back to Lone Valley last year. The suffocating fog not seen for 20 years has returned to Lone Valley this winter, and along with it, that long-forgotten fear. They found the first girl's body last week. A blue ribbon tied in a neat bow around her neck. There's been 2 more murders since. I see the fear in my wife's eyes. She's seen the spool of blue ribbon in the linen cupboard. She also knows better than to ask me where I've been when I go for one of my walks into the fog. If you like what you heard, please like and share the video. Please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. And remember, the dark plays tricks with our minds, but sometimes it's not a trick. Sometimes there really is something there.